There we go.
Hello and welcome. Oh. Hello and welcome. You are listening to the Spiritual Sisters podcast. My name is Gabrielle Celeste.
And it's me, Nichole Christine, coming to you
And
from a very small but very echoey room in Spain.
yeah, this, I've posted this a couple times on social media, but this time change and time difference and different country setup doesn't work for me. So I'm like, you can't go. Not happening.
Yeah, it's been
Selfishly.
rough. It's
Are
been
you ready to
rough.
come home? Because I miss you.
I'm so ready to come home. I miss you too.
I
Yeah,
bet.
it's rough. I have a funny story before we get
Ooh,
into
I want to hear your funny story.
our huh?
My check-in can wait. I want to hear your funny story. You guys,
Okay.
we literally go from talking like 4 times a day, texting to each other, and then in our group message with our siblings. And it's like I talk to her once a
Maybe.
week on the phone with
Yeah.
some texts. I'm like, bitch, you can't leave me. You
I
cannot.
know. I know.
I
It's rough.
refuse.
It's been rough. So this is how rough it is.
You look a little bit out of your energy for those of you watching on YouTube.
Yeah, this is
But your
like
hair
the
looks
only the
pretty.
this is the first time I've done my hair this whole
Hmm.
trip because it's been so humid. When we
Oh,
first got here, it was so humid
yeah.
that I just rocked dirty bunny hair for a while. But anyway, so one of my biggest complaints
Hmm.
about domestic life
Oh,
in Europe, period,
okay.
is that anytime we have a home with a washing machine,
Hmm.
that's all there is. Like, they don't use dryers out here. I think I've only had maybe one Airbnb out of all the times we've been here that has a dryer.
Yeah.
So you always have to hang dry everything, right?
Yeah. Oh.
So I already told him if we move here, we're getting a washer dryer combo. Like, I refuse to keep hanging drying clothes. So anyway, we got to our new destination yesterday
Hmm.
and we hung dry clothes. Like, I had no clothes. Like, all my clothes were dirty. Had one shirt and it was dirty and I rocked it. So anyway, I had to do all the laundry.
Hmm.
Well, this morning I went to go check on it to make sure that it was dry and ready to come in. And when I opened the little back door to the patio, and mind you, this little patio, like, I couldn't even get the little drying rack out to the little patio because
Hmm.
it was so small. Like, that's how small the patio was. And so I go to get it and I feel water dropping on me. And I was like, wait a minute, why is the floor wet? Is it fucking raining? It was like raining. So all the clothes were still wet. Okay. So my husband was out walking and then he comes home and we were trying to plan the day. And he's like, okay, where we're going to go. And I was like, I don't have any fucking clothes. Like, all my clothes are wet. I washed them and they're wet. He's like, oh, well, what about like the shirt you're wearing? I'm like, I slept in this shirt. This is the only shirt I have. Like, I have no clean clothes.
Hmm.
And he's like, oh man, okay. So there's a laundromat across the street. So, my wonderful husband, he's problem solving mode. He's like, oh, we'll just go dry the clothes at the laundromat. All right, fine. So I come out of the bathroom and he had just gotten back. Actually, he didn't even tell me that he was going to go do it, but we had seen the laundromat the other day. So he comes back and he's like, oh, I went to go take the clothes to the laundromat. Cool. So I said, did you make sure to put it on low heat?
Oh
And he's
no.
like, no, I think it's fine because remember the last time we were here and we had it on low heat, it took like hours to dry. So it's on high heat, but it's only going to be in there for like 15 minutes. Like, I think it's going to be fine. So he brings the clothes back. My son is 7 years old, right?
Hmm.
Okay. For YouTube, and we'll post this in a reel on Instagram. This is my son's sock. This is not a 7-year-old sock. This is like a 2-year-old sock, maybe. Mm-hmm. The romper that I'm wearing shrunk. Lots of things shrunk. My husband's socks now look like they should be for my son. So anyway, that's my biggest gripe about domestic life in Europe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys don't really pack heavy when you guys go because you know you're going to have places with those utilities.
We always do carry on. So I only pack enough for like maybe a week, if that. Like I don't pack a lot of clothes.
Hang on.
Yeah. So anyway.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, because it was on orange that whole time.
Oh, weird. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But
anyway,
you're there. You're almost home. So is
Ready.
that your check-in? Aside from
Yeah.
that, how are you doing?
Fucking toddler socks for my almost 8-year-old. That is all.
Well, happy August to you, even though,
Yay.
you know, it's by the time it comes out like mid-August. So
Yeah, we're only like only a week ahead. We're usually at least a month ahead. We're falling behind.
It's because we knew that we were going to be pretty slammed personal schedule-wise this summer, and that's been true. But no, I'm good. I mean, this morning I got up and I went to cycle on the beach by myself, and I haven't been cycling in like 9 months.
Oh.
And yeah, I busted out like 21 miles, and I'm only like 12 minutes ahead of what my usual pace is at. So I was pretty proud of myself, but I'm like 75% out of my, like through my ego death, I would say. And I'm kind of just cruising, looking for just like the newness to come in, if that makes sense. I'm just like, all right, still grinding, still creating, still doing what I need to do. But it's kind of like that period. I think it's referred to as the magic dark, before you feel you're just like, oh, what's next? You're kind of just like stagnant, but you're not, because you're like moving the needle, but you know that like you're about to go through a transition of sorts. And that's definitely where I'm at. And I'm ready for it. So yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, it's rough. I'm like, why do ego deaths have to be so challenging? This one isn't as rough as I've had it, but they aren't the easiest thing to move through.
You'll be fine.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You've done this before.
Many times. It's not going to be the last either.
So speaking of death, what are we talking about today?
Reincarnation, baby. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Are you excited?
Yes.
I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but do you believe in reincarnation?
Yes.
How many of your past lives do you know, aside from the one we did for your birthday reading? By the way, go check it out, guys. Please rate and review and comment and share. Thank you very much.
I don't know. It's a great question.
Yeah.
Maybe 2? 3? Yeah.
But you had vivid memories of your past lives via your dreams.
Yeah, I'm including that in that number. Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk about some cultures that definitely believe in reincarnation, and we're going to speak to those beliefs as well. So, and then you have a story to share too about the Pollack Twins. Who, by the way, I don't even know who they are.
Yeah, you always like to give everything away. You're not good at surprises.
Is it surprise?
Period. Well, no, but it would,
because I have no idea what it is.
No, but it would have just been like, okay, we're going to talk about this. Like, you always have to give away episode.
You know, it's funny.
Ideas to people.
Say that sorry for saying that in advance and spilling the surprise, but I actually was planning on.
I'm going to edit it out.
Okay, well then edit it out. Are you not editing it out? No? Okay.
I don't know. We'll see how I feel.
It depends on her mood, you guys. She's more moody as a Cancer than I am. Let me just say that.
100%.
I was going to post a story on Instagram, so I'm so glad I didn't do that. Just like relaying all of the topics that we're speaking to for that month in terms of episode topics. But I think that people actually are responding very well to going one by one, like every week. And I'm noticing that with the numbers that we're getting for the downloads and listening to the podcast episode. So whatever we're doing is working.
Yeah, when you give it away, I feel like people are like, okay, well, when is that going to be, right? And a lot of times it's not right away. So it's like, oh, we're eventually going to do this. But it's like, well, it's going to be months away. And people are going to be like, when the fuck are they going to do this? That's why I never like to, me personally, I never give out anything ahead of time.
I think that's my impatience speaking. But anyways.
Oh, God, so impatient.
So
Okay,
we should.
so today we're talking about reincarnation.
Hmm.
What is it? Let's go because it's 8 o'clock here and we still haven't had dinner.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so we're going to start with the Egyptians and their beliefs about reincarnation.
Well, what
And
is reincarnation, first of all? Let's
so,
dumb it down. Let's not assume anybody knows.
my understanding of reincarnation, personal observation through doing readings as well, in the records, the Akashic records, is that your soul is literally repeating or having another um, go around
Mm.
on Earth in a new body in order to fulfill their specific mission, sometimes referred to as soul contracts. And if they don't meet that mission, they have to come back and repeat in a different form that mission and complete that mission, aka fulfill the soul contract otherwise.
How many lives do people need to try to meet their goal or fulfill their soul contract, meet the mission?
I don't know that, but I will say I have observed a lot via the charts, and it's quite interesting because I've noticed that the cleaner the chart, they're probably either on their last incarnation or they don't have very many more to go. The messier the chart, they're definitely coming back. However, go ahead.
So, what were we going to say?
They do get so, and this is actually spoken to in the different cultures that we're going to get into and explain via their beliefs about reincarnation. But there is this belief that if you do reincarnate or have to reincarnate, you have mastered lessons from a previous lifetime, that you take that mastery with you into your next reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe that.
In the book Journey of Souls, he talks a lot about um, the different contracts that people have and the different lifetimes that they end up having to come back for. And it sounds like it's a lot. Like people
I
have been
know.
reincarnating for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So when I hear, oh, maybe this is going to be the last lifetime, like I'm a little skeptical because from just what I've read in that book, it sounds like it goes on for a very, 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 very long time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I know you're going to jump into it, into the cultures, and it isn't always necessarily on planet Earth. It can be other planets that maybe don't exist anymore. That is all.
I believe that.
Continue. Yeah.
Would you, if you had the choice to reincarnate on Earth, would you?
No, sucks here.
Our friend that rules the records, she sent me a meme the other day. And it was this alien that was just like slumped down. I think he was like drinking a beer or something. I can't recall, but it's like, take me to another planet. This one's ghetto, referring to
Yeah,
planet
this one
Earth.
sucks. Planet Earth is awful. Okay, so let's.
So we're going to start with the Egyptians because the Egyptians, they're cool. So Egyptians believe that the soul was not a single unified entity, which I agree with. I believe that the soul is vast and there's a lot of different layers, and it's probably so yet undiscovered or unknown, and there's probably a lot to learn.
Well, in
Yes.
Journey of Souls, they talk about how your soul also splits.
Mm-hmm.
So your soul comes down to Earth to reincarnate, but also a piece of it stays in the spirit world. So that way, anytime there's any kind of reuniting of with past souls, like your soul's already there to greet them also.
Mm-hmm.
So just because somebody maybe passed before you doesn't mean that the other piece of your soul isn't going to be there to greet them, even if you're still alive here on Earth, which I thought was really interesting.
I just keep thinking back to my birthday reading with Chels, where she was like, there's another piece of your soul living in another dimension that wants to meet you. I'm like, yeah, I can
Mm-hmm.
believe that.
Yeah.
So the Egyptians believed that the soul was split into three important parts: the Ka, the Ba, and the Ak. And the ka is what we most traditionally understand to be the soul. And it's quite literally that energy body that's encapsulated into our human body. And the ka is also that three-parter, that one third of the soul that needs sustenance upon death. And a fun fact about Egyptians is that they would paint images of food and drink onto the tomb walls to sustain the ka in the case that the living ancestors, living in general, wouldn't provide offerings for their ancestors. And I actually believe that to be very true because when I first started my ancestral work, when I started with doing the sacral, and the sacral was ancestral for me and directly linked to it, one of the healers I was working with, she was like, you need to create your altar and you need to put food on there or offerings like honey, coffee, flowers, put your card decks, all of that on there. And it's directly right next to where I sleep, which it's not supposed to be, FYI, for those listeners out there. But I can directly see my energy or the energy of my ancestors there. So when I say like, oh, I see the heat there, it's because like I can see the living energy of the ka of our ancestors right next to the altar.
It reminds me of like Day of the Dead where they leave out offerings for the spirits.
And we do that in our culture.
Yeah.
I have a question, fun fact. Well, not fun fact, but question, because I had this conversation with Dad yesterday as we were running around doing errands. We were talking about the Egyptians and the pyramids. And maybe in like the pyramids in Mexico too. Do you think that the aliens helped our ancestors and ancestors of those cultures to build the pyramids?
Maybe. I've never really thought about it, but I could see how they would have. Could have.
So we have the Ba, which is the more mobile aspect of the soul. And that is the part of the soul that is able to leave the tomb and the realm of the dead by day. So it can take the form of, say, a bird with the deceased person's head. And the Ba, so the two-thirds of the soul, was considered to be representative of the person's heart and would hold the personality of said person that had passed on.
Sorry.
The third and the last part of the mortal soul was the Ak, which is the least like understood part of it. And little is actually known about that, but they said that this is the part of the soul that would pass on to the afterlife. And if they had luck, they would pass on to the field of reeds, which was what the Egyptians knew to be afterlife. And that's where they would go if they made it that far.
The Ba kind of reminded me of, you know, how they say when you're asleep, your soul like travels.
Astral travel?
Like it, not necessarily astral travel, but just your soul like leaves your body and goes and like travels throughout the night while your body's resting. Your soul's kind of like out playing. Kind of reminded me of that.
Like when we fall asleep, where do we go? Kind of a
Yeah.
thing. That's so true. I think Billie Eilish has a song that's named after, literally named that. Anyways, or maybe an album. But when a person died, so a part of their soul, most likely the Ak, the one that's the least understood, would travel to the underworld, which is also known as the Duat, for judgment, which I think is kind of like in Western understanding when we pass, like we're going to have like our judgment, right? And that's how the Egyptians understood that process to be. And Anubis, who's often referred to, I've always seen him in like pictures like tall, statured, kind of like a wolf looking dog like creature with the head, black. He would be like, he's depicted in movies quite often, actually, in Egyptian movies or like mythological ones. He is said to have guided the souls, kind of like carrying them on a boat and making sure they pass like that river of sorts is kind of the vision that I'm getting. Taylor Swift just had a music video that came out and she had a direct, it was Karma featuring Ice Spice, where she's like moving her on the boat and she's shepherding her through all the darkness because she's already gone through the shitty parts of being in the music industry. And that was a direct metaphor to this mythological reference where she's actually, you know, and that's what like Anubis would do for the souls to make sure that they would get to the other part. But the Egyptians believed that the process of judgment was twofolded. And the first part of that was that the person, it's almost like a two-part test, that the person's heart would be measured against the mat, is what they refer to it as, in the Hall of Truth. And Osiris, I don't know who he is, would oversee this weighing of the heart. So it's almost kind of like an evaluation of the love you had here on earth, because heart represents love. And on the other side, there would be a single feather from Mot. Actually, take this part out. I don't like it. Delete that.
We have like 10 more minutes for history.
Okay. Where did I leave off at? The Duat. Okay, the Anubis would go over and take their souls over. Okay, we'll start here. So Egyptians believed that paradise, again, where Anubis was taking them, was nearly identical to what they had here in the mortal realm on Earth. And they would find their loved ones, their animals, their pets, literally like their home on the other side, just like in a different dimension, a parallel dimension. Which I actually, like, the more that I talk to people about this and the more I do readings in the records, I kind of believe this. The only difference is that, like, they would never die there. The transition at this point would be complete, and would at that point the cycle of reincarnation would not need to be repeated.
Huh.
So isn't that interesting if they made it that far?
Did you ever
But
finish Journey of Souls?
I have like 5 hours left.
What have you been doing that you haven't finished it? I like couldn't not listen to it. It was so good.
Do you know, I have realized about audiobooks is that I have about like 10 that I'm reading at once. And the narrator makes a big difference in terms of my engagement or not. And did you know that audiobook authors, if you don't listen to it in full, then they
don't
only
get paid for all of it. Yeah.
But I'll finish it, guys. Don't worry. Okay. So that's what it is for the Egyptians. And I also wanted to share Hinduism because I thought that was equally as interesting. And then I actually want to know about your beliefs too, Nichole, because I feel like there's a lot of parallels amongst cultures that are very similar, yet like the process is just a tad bit different. However, we'll get to that in the consensus part. Hinduism is of the belief that life does not end at the death of the physical body, which I agree with. That the physical body dies, but the soul does not. That it lives on in a counterpart of the physical body, which is called the astral body. And the astral body is made of astral matter and resides in a world not unlike this one, which they refer to as the Devaloka, or the second world. Devaloka. Devaloka. Yeah, I think I'm enunciating that correctly. Pronouncing. Jesus, Gabby. Okay. In other words, the soul lives on in another body after death, known as the astral body. And at the right time, the astral body, according to its karma, aka soul mission or its contract, is reborn again into a flesh body. And the astral body, at this point, with the soul in it, enters a new physical body. And this cycle of reincarnation is repeated many times until the soul spiritually unfolds and reaches a certain state of perfection or mature evolution or enlightenment, as it can sometimes be referred to. And these repeated cycles of births and deaths are known as samsara in Hinduism. Thoughts?
I was just thinking when you were talking about that, just about the idea of soul contracts. And so every lifetime your soul's going to have a different contract, right? So it's not like you have one soul and you're trying to meet the one contract in every lifetime. Like, for example, if your contract is to learn to be selfless, like that's
Mm-hmm.
not going to be the contract for 10 lifetimes necessarily, or 100 lifetimes, however many you
No.
need. It's just, it's maybe just for that lifetime or until you meet the contract, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's interesting that you say that too, because it shows up in the charts. And I've wondered what the progression is once that karma has been met and like why you would
Mm-hmm.
have to come back again. Because in the chart, it's known as the North Node and the South Node. So the North Node is where your soul is going in this lifetime, and it's the area of life, depending on the house that it falls into, that you are meant to master. And the South Node represents the area of life where your most previous lifetime, like you've already mastered those areas
Mm-hmm.
and those lessons that are associated with that area of life, right? So I wonder, it's like, okay, well, if you've dealt with the South Node in, say, Libra, and you're here with your North Node in Aries, and you've completed that part of the axis on a chart, does the North Node and the South Node shift to another axis, aka other areas of life that you would have to come back to for enlightenment?
You're
And I think
speaking
about
a
that all the
foreign
time.
language, so I have no idea what any of that means.
It means if we've if we've already fulfilled the lessons in those two respective areas of life, why would
Mm-hmm.
we have to come back? You know?
Well, because there's like, I mean, I'm telling you, it sounds like people are doing like hundreds of lifetimes.
Mm. So at this point, some people are probably like, well, how do I stop reincarnating, guys? Because that was my thought.
I think you need to do it hundreds of times because it sounds like people have been reincarnating for tens of thousands of years. Again, not even necessarily on as humans, but in other realms. And it sounds like it's really difficult, according to Journey of Souls, for people to not reincarnate. Like, really difficult. I wish you would have finished it because I feel like there's so much in there that is just like so good. If you have 5 hours, like it started getting real juicy towards the end.
I recognize that if I have a resistance to finishing something, or if I'm not finishing something, it's because of resistance. And I'm also having a hard time because, and it's this isn't an arrogant thing at all by any means, but like I truly believe I'm on my last lifetime on Earth, and like I've had enough readings that validate that.
Maybe on Earth, but not necessarily period,
Oh,
like finality.
no, I know I'm going somewhere else. I just know I'm not coming back to Earth.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That, yeah, to clarify.
That I
To
believe. Yeah.
clarify for those people out there, and our Maverick friend can affirm this because she saw the same thing. But I think I'm struggling in this lifetime because, and I know that's about to change because my partner's going to come in and I'm going to become a mother and all of that. And that's going to change a lot of things for me. But I think there's a cellular remembrance from my previous lifetime of being like, what the fuck? How come I didn't get it right this last time? And like, why do I have to come back again and do it here? And I truly believe my last incarnation was during the time of World War II,
You
which
were the old crone.
exactly. So it's like, all right, I've heard that my soul has been here at every turn of the century. So it's like, this is done. We're done. So like I can't come back to Earth. I'm done. My soul's tired.
Yeah.
And there's a cellular remembrance for that. And that's actually something that I wanted to speak to with the topic of reincarnation is that you, when you are so gifted at say certain things, certain skill sets, talents, it's there has to be like a past life slash cellular remembrance that you've kind of done this already before and you've taken on this skill set to embody that in this lifetime and to live it out in a new way. So Hindus called the moksha, which is freedom from rebirth, which is pretty much like the ending of reincarnation in some capacity. I would like to think that that is in reference to reincarnation on Earth, because again, you could probably reincarnate in different dimensions and planets, which I
Mm-hmm.
totally believe. And the question that they posed is like, what must a person do if they want to, reach that blissful state of union with a higher power, source, God, universe, however you refer to it as, right? And their idea is that after a number of certain incarnations where you've kind of been hitting like those numbers and those lessons and completing all the contracts, after you've done that a couple times, then you break that cycle of reincarnation on earth. And this release from samsara or reincarnation is called moksha. And the soul at that point is said to be freed from the bondage of birth and death. There's a book, there was a podcast I was listening to, and I think she referenced it in Law of One, where she was speaking to the fact, having read of like when the souls are about to be reincarnated through in the birthing tunnel and they're, coming out of like the woman's womb and uterus, that the soul is quite literally screaming because it's about to be encapsulated in a human body for however long. And that as it's making that transition point from like a different dimension and coming into the human body through the birthing process, the soul recognizes that it's just like, fuck, like, what am I about to do? Because souls most often are actually more comfortable with the oneness and not being confined to a physical body. But that's not true for everyone, because some people like
I
being
don't
here on planet
know.
Earth.
I mean, I understand it's not the encyclopedia reincarnation, but it sounds like souls are picking the bodies they want. They're given choices of different bodies, different locations, different genders, different everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think, and again, this is according to the book, but I would think that if they're making the choices and saying, okay, this is what I'm going to choose to do, this is a family I'm being this is the family that I'm choosing to be born into. This is the body I'm choosing to be born into. Like, I know what the life is going to look like. Like, I wouldn't understand why they would be screaming when like they've literally been able to like handpick what they want to do. The soul has.
Yeah, I haven't read Law of One yet, and that was just me going off of like what I had heard on a podcast. But I can believe that too. And I also,
Yeah.
it makes me wonder, do you think our souls know exactly how our lives on earth are going to be written out before we incarnate?
Well, if you had listened to the book and
I'll get
finished
there.
it,
I'll get
you
there.
would know that that's what the book says. That's kind of what the consensus was from all the different people that he put into hypnosis and past life regression is you pass away from one lifetime, you go back to the spirit world, you do a life review and you check to see, okay, what were the lessons? Did you meet this? Where could you have done better? Where did you do really well? Right. And then the soul kind of regenerates during that time. And especially for people that have had maybe really difficult lives, like they talked about people who have like harmed others. So my first thought went to like serial killer type people.
Yeah.
So sometimes they're put into like maybe isolation to regenerate. And then when it comes time for the next lifetime, well, sorry, so prior to that, they kind of go to like school where you
Yes.
are,
Yes.
yes. So, do you want to speak to that?
Well, this actually came up in my mediumship practice recently where I was like, wait, I'm noticing like a pattern and a theme where the souls that pass on, especially the souls that are troubled, they go and do work and they actually have a job and they're guided by, higher entities, guides, angels, whatever, whoever we're working with on the other side before they reincarnate. But they're doing that work, they have that job so that they can
Right.
reincarnate and fulfill it. And I was actually really surprised to know that like shit, they're busy on the other side actually doing something.
Well, everybody's doing that regardless of if they had or, if they were a difficult soul or had a rough life. Like everybody's working with their guides and everybody's kind of doing that regeneration, that healing. And then you go to school and, you're learning different things and they're learning how to like manipulate elements and how to do like lots of things. And then it's like, okay, it's time to pick your next life. And so you're like given choices. Okay, so do you want this life, or that life? And this life is going to be in this body, this life is going to be in this body, this location, this family. These are going to be the lessons for each of those bodies. Which ones do you want? And so for some people, they might be used to having several lives in like a male body. So they're like, you know what? I'm going to try a female body this time. And this is going to be the lesson that I learned. So from my understanding, from what I read, they're quite literally picking what they want to do and how they want to do it. So I
Did that
don't know.
make you
The
think
whole,
about your life?
yeah, why the fuck did I choose this? Choose this. But anyway, that was just one piece of it. So it sounds like we have a lot of control over it.
Yeah. So the moksha Hindus, they that practice Hinduism, they are seeking moksha, and they want to have that oneness and that enlightenment, so that they don't have to refer to or reincarnate in what they refer to as the first world, which I would think is probably Earth. And they, in their practice, continuously seek and attain profound spiritual realizations so that they can break that cycle in the long run.
And then they eventually go up to the spirit world and they become guides for the younger souls and the newer souls.
Guides like ascended masters.
No, like guides, like just different like spirit guides in the spirit world. So everybody has their team of guides up there too. And you
I
have your
can't,
soul families too.
right. I can't decide if I want to come back as like an ascended master, not to Earth, but like a different, dimension. Or if I just want to like reincarnate on a different planet, because apparently my mission on Earth this go around is preparing me for wherever I'm going next.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what we got for the cultures, guys.
I remember reading something about Hinduism, and I don't remember if it had to have been one of the books I've been reading. And I remember thinking, I really align with this, with
Mm-hmm.
like the beliefs of Hinduism. It might have been
Mm-hmm.
Think Like a Monk. I don't know.
Isn't that
That
such a good
was
book? I finished that one.
so
That
good.
was good.
So good. Took me a couple years to finish it because I started it and then I just never finished it. And then I recently did. Okay, so I wanted to share the story of the Pollack twins to kind of make the case
Surprise.
for reincarnation. And this is really interesting. I find this case really, really fascinating. So I hope you enjoy it. So we're going to be talking about the Pollack family. So the Pollack family consists of the dad, John, and the mom, Florence. And they were from the UK. So they were out in England. And they had, well, it's hard to say how many kids they had. But okay, so they had Joanna Pollock. She was born in 1946 and she was the third child to them. She was the first daughter. And then they had Jacqueline Pollock and she was born in 1951. So she would have been the fourth child and the second daughter. And
Hmm.
so he was raised in the Church of England, but he eventually converted to Catholicism. So even though he was involved in like the Christian church and then Catholicism, he really, really believed in reincarnation. And it kind of came on his radar when he was like 9 years old. He like read it in a book. And he said he would pray to God at night as a child for proof of reincarnation to kind of like prove himself right and prove the Catholic priests wrong. So at a very young age, he was like all about it. He really believed in it. And so John and Florence, mom and dad, they were like pretty busy. They had like a grocery store, milk delivery business. And so the two girls, Jacqueline and Joanna, were kind of raised primarily by their maternal grandmother because they were just so busy working. And the sisters were pretty close, like really, really close. Joanna, she was the older one. And so she would kind of mother Jacqueline. And the little girl was cool with it, right? She was like, yeah, you can mother me. Like, you're my older sister, but you can mother me. That's fine. And Joanna liked to wear costumes and she would act in plays, like she would make up her own plays and she would just kind of act. And she was really generous with like other children. So she would share a lot with them and she was just really good with like other children in general. And they liked combing other people's hair, so especially their dad's hair. So just keep those little tidbits in mind. They're going to come back later. And so Joanna had a premonition that she like wasn't going to grow up, and she would often say like, I'll never be a lady. And so, I think they just kind of heard it and didn't really think a whole lot of it. Now, Jacqueline, when she was 3, she fell into a bucket and she got like a small gash on her forehead over her right eye. So around this side, kind of like near the roof of her nose. And it like scarred permanently. And so it was slightly depressed and it was really visible, especially like in cold weather. And Jacqueline also had a roundish dark birthmark on the left side of her waist. So keep those little things in mind too. So May 7th, 1957, Joanna was 11, Jacqueline was 6, and they were walking to church with a friend and they were hit by a car and they were unfortunately killed when they were hit by the car. All 3 of the kids were. And so it was a local woman who was trying to commit suicide. She had had her kids removed from her, and so she had taken like lethal quantities of like aspirin and phenobarbital. And people, like witnesses, saw her driving kind of erratically and like bearing down on the kids, like intentionally trying to hit the kids. So let's see. Okay, so the 2 little girls and their friend passed away. Obviously, parents are like devastated, right? Like, how can you not be devastated? You just lost 2 of your kids, 2 of your 4 kids. And so mom tried to like not think about it too much. And dad was the opposite, right? Because remember, dad was really invested in the idea of reincarnation. So he said that he had a vision of the girls in heaven, like the day of the accident. And he said he would sense their presence, like their spirits in the home. And he would spend a lot of time in the home, like trying to be close to them. And so for him, he was saying he felt like their death was punishment from God for having like asked for proof of reincarnation, right? He wanted it so bad. So in his mind, God's like, well, you kept asking for it. So here you go, like deal with it. And the wife, she was the opposite, right? She didn't have the strong beliefs that he did. So she was just kind of like, like he's fucking crazy or whatever. So so mom got pregnant again, and dad was convinced that the girls were going to be reincarnated into the family as twins. And the wife was like, no, that's not going to happen. And the doctor said, that's not happening. This is a single birth. There's only one heartbeat. Twins don't run in any of the families. Like, dad, you're wrong. So lo and behold, October 4th, 1958, Florence mom had twin girls and they named them Jillian and Jennifer. It's so funny. I was thinking, so common mystics, they're Jennifer and Jill, Jillian and Jennifer. But I don't think she goes by Jillian, but this one is Jillian with the G.
We love them. We're big fangirls.
Yeah. Anyway, so Jennifer had a birthmark that looked like Jacqueline's scar. So remember the little girl, she fell in a bucket and she got a scar on her like forehead over her right eye. So Jennifer had a birthmark that looked like that. And she had a second birthmark on the side of her waist where Jacqueline also had that small birthmark on, I think it was the left side of her waist. And I've heard that sometimes when people have birthmarks, that it's an indication of how they may have died in a past life. So, which is weird because I have this weird kind of birthmark on my chin, and my son has like this really weird one, like on his nose.
Hmm.
So I've always kind of wondered what our weird little birthmarks mean. And he has a one like on his chest too, kind of.
I have one on my knee, but I know in a previous life I was stabbed in medieval times as a witch, and that other birthmark has yet to be found.
Yeah. So anyway, so the girls, the twins, they made like different statements saying that, sorry, they made different statements that related to their older sisters, the ones that had passed away, Joanna and Jacqueline, things that they would have experienced between the ages of like 3 and 7. So the parents were like, what are they saying? Like, this has nothing to do with them, but this was their like older sisters' lives who they never met, right? They passed away, what was it, like a year? Excuse me, like a year and a half before they were born. So when the girls were about 3, so the twins, when they were about 3, the parents brought out some toys that had belonged to the older girls, to Jacqueline and Joanna. And they pulled them out from like the attic or wherever they had them. And Jillian claimed that a doll that had belonged to Joanna. So, sorry, Jillian claimed a doll that had belonged to Joanna. And then Jennifer claimed a doll that had belonged to Jacqueline. So they each grabbed a different doll. And they said that the gifts had been gifts from Santa, which when they had received them, or sorry, when the sisters had received them, they're like Christmas Santa gifts. And so they didn't even fight over the toys because they each kind of like went to their assigned toys that they said were theirs, which actually belonged to their sisters and their when their sisters were alive. And so sometimes mom would hear them talking about the accident that happened. And so one day mom came in and Jillian was cradling Jennifer's head and she was saying, the blood's coming out of your eyes. That's where the car hit you. And the dad remembered that when he had to go identify the bodies, that Jacqueline's head had been bandaged above the eyes. And one time, Jillian also pointed to Jennifer's forehead birthmark, and she said, that's the mark Jennifer got when she fell in a bucket. It's like remembering or recalling a situation that happened again with the sisters that they had never met that were alive before them. So all these things just kept happening. So mom had a smock, like an apron, right, that she would wear when she was helping dad with the milk delivery business. And so she had put it away after the daughters died because she wasn't working anymore. She didn't need it. And so one day dad was wearing it and Jennifer asked him, "Why are you wearing mommy's coat?" And he was like, "What are you talking about?" And when he asked her like how she knew that it belonged to mom, he was like, "Oh, like she used to wear that when she was delivering milk." Well, she didn't have any knowledge of that because mom wasn't doing that job anymore. So again, like recalling something that the sisters would have known in their previous life. And they had lived in a town previously, and then they had moved when the twins were about like 9 months old. And so about 4 years later, they went back to the town to go visit it. And they were walking to a park, and you couldn't see the park yet, but the girls said they wanted to go across the street to the park to go use the swings and like knew how to get there. But like they hadn't lived there since they were 9 months old. So they weren't going to have memories of like walking to the park, but they did. And then let's see. No, that one we won't go into. Okay. So dad was saying, so all these like things kept adding up, right? And dad was like, they're like talking about the accident to themselves. Like they're speaking about things as if it's happening like currently, like they're reliving it, right? And they almost had like similar behaviors to their sisters. So like put the birthmarks aside, right? But the girls were really close, the same way that their older sisters had been really close. And Jillian liked to mother Jennifer. right? So if you remember, I think it was Jacqueline was the older one. She liked to mother Joanna. And same thing here, the little girl was like fine with it. And looked they looked to maternal grandmother a lot who raised their sisters. And for them, that wasn't the case because mom wasn't working the way she had been with the milk delivery business. So there was no reason for them to really look to grandma, but they did. And that was what their sisters had done, right? Because their sisters were mostly raised by the grandma. And they liked to comb people's hair, and they especially liked to comb their dad's hair. Jillian was more sociable and generous with the other kids and showed an interest in costumes and acting in plays. So if you remember at the beginning, I think it was Jacqueline. She liked to act in plays, wear costumes. So Jillian was also the same way. And she seemed a little more mature than her twin sister, even though they were twins, right? They're identical ages. So still kind of had that more like older sister type of vibe. And then they had like these phobias related to cars. So mom would notice that they'd be really careful, like crossing the streets, and they would hold hands, which she also recognized that that could have just been, her own caution, like, okay, girls, make sure you're holding hands, right? But she noticed those things. And one time a car engine started near them, and the girls like cringed and they clung to each other and they were crying and they were like, the car, it's coming for us. So just odd little behaviors like that. And when Jacqueline and Joanna were still alive obviously before they passed, Jacqueline was learning to write, and her teacher was kind of worried about the way she was holding her pencil upright in her fist. So almost like this and not, I wish I had a pencil, but like holding it like this and not like a pencil, the way you would hold it. And so the teacher had suggested to the parents that they try to correct it by slapping her hand. The way they would correct behavior back in the day. Very
it's abuse
interesting.
Now.
Yeah. And when Jillian and Jennifer began learning to write at the age of 4, Jillian immediately held the pencil properly, and Jennifer held it upright in her fist, and she only started holding it the right way when she was 7. And so, again, just some of those same mannerisms. And even physically, their bodies resembled that of their sisters. So Joanna was somewhat slender, and so was Jillian. And Jennifer was a little bit stocky, and that was more like the build of Jacqueline. Joanna had a more splay-footed gait than Jacqueline did, and that difference, I said, also showed up in Jillian and Jennifer. So physically, they look the same. They have the same type of like foot. Foot. I wouldn't say fetish. Was not a fetish. What is it? Foot abnormalities. And let's see. Oh, we talked already about the birthmark. Okay. Okay. So somebody had come in when the girls got a little bit older to investigate it. It was someone who was like investigating reincarnation in children. And the twins were monozygotic. Is that what it is? Monozygotic. So they were identical twins.
Oh.
So I think that's when you have like the same egg and it splits. So it's identical versus like 2 eggs being like fertilized. I could be wrong, but I think that's what it is. Oh. So they were saying like since they were genetically identical, like there was no reason for like they couldn't explain the birthmarks and they couldn't explain the birthmarks because they're identical. So they should have the exact same birthmarks. And I wonder how true that still is, maybe scientifically, because I mean, this was in the 50s. So maybe 60s, but I wonder how much science has progressed that maybe that's not a thing anymore. Um, okay. So as the twins got older, they kind of started to forget their past life memories, which I hear is kind of common. Like
Common.
I've heard other stories about reincarnation, and like as they get older, they start to forget, which, they say the reason why they remember is because they're so close, or they're much closer to their past lives, right? So
Yeah.
I'm 2 years old, 3 years old. My past life was maybe, 43 years ago, depending on how much time is between their past lives. Because even with that, there isn't a set amount of time. With this, the sisters passed away in May, and these girls were born in October of the next year. So there was maybe like a 6 month time difference from the time they passed away till the time mom got pregnant, if I'm doing my math right. If we go back to Journey of Souls, excuse me, if we go back to Journey of Souls, sometimes they say it could take several years, sometimes it could take
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of years, right? But there is
Mm-hmm.
no set amount of time that needs to be in place for a soul to reincarnate. So anyway, they got older, they started forgetting, they weren't really talking about it much. And so they just grew up, they had their normal lives, and they kind of believed, they accepted that their parents believed that they were reincarnations of their older sisters, but they were kind of skeptical about it. Like they didn't necessarily believe it, but they're like, oh, like, okay, like our parents believe it, so whatever. And then in 1981, Jillian experienced some like visions where she says she saw herself playing in a sandpit with her brothers. And she described the house, the garden, the lawns, the orchards, like everything perfectly in detail. And it was a house that her family had lived in when her deceased older sister, Joanna, was alive, and she was under the age of 4. And Jillian had never even been to that house. So they were like, how is she like recalling this house? Like she never was there. And when her older sister was there, she was like under the age of 4. Like there's no way. So if we think about like criticism and skepticism, right? Some people say like the parents planted memories in the twins, and some people say that maybe the parents were talking about it in front of them, and the parents say like they never did. They're like, no, we didn't ever talk about the accident or any of those things. But I mean, it's possible they could have picked up things here and there if the parents were talking about it. And also, they had older brothers, right, who maybe could have been talking about it, who maybe could have told them some of these pieces of information. So there wasn't really, again, right, it's so hard to prove these things, but it's like, well, did that really happen, or did family kind of plant the memories
Mm-hmm.
into their heads? Like, is that how they know all these things?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think?
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
When did you hear about them? Because I had never heard about them.
Years ago.
Really? So it was like a
Hmm.
thing. Do you know if they're
Yeah.
still living? Because their ages are still like they'd be in their 70s, which I mean they can.
Yeah, I mean, not even their 70s, they'd be in like their 60s because they were born in,
67. No,
yeah,
it's 53,
57,
right? 50,
57.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So they'd be in their 60s. Mm-hmm.
Um, I I think they were. I was trying to get information on what's going on with them now, and there wasn't a lot of current stuff, so I think they just try to probably fly under the radar.
Mm.
Hmm.
I, I mean, I buy it. I believe it. I've heard
Yeah.
crazier shit. Uh, I mean, I think it's traumatic that their parents had to go through the death of children.
Ugh.
I could never, but
And that's a soul contract lesson, right? Where
mm-hmm,
sometimes people say like, oh, like I chose to come into this life to die as like an infant because my parents needed to learn the lesson of grief.
mm-hmm.
Oh, can you imagine?
There's placements in the charts. So Pluto in the fifth, where I've seen that be like a thing, where it's like, yeah,
Mm.
you're Yeah.
Mm-mm.
So the charts definitely speak to that. Yeah, I buy it. I was actually very enthralled with the storytelling. So I just want to say I think you're a great storyteller. And I
Oh,
was like,
thank
yeah,
you.
you're welcome. I genuinely mean that.
It's really interesting, right? Like the birthmarks, the same type of mannerisms, the same type of yeah, just the relationship, the closeness. Like it's really interesting.
There's a university, I think it's out of Pennsylvania, where they actually do studies on children about 18 months to 2 years old. And the kids have to be older because I don't even know that kids are like verbally speaking properly at that age, where they literally focus on reincarnation. And it's actually like, first of all, I didn't even know that metaphysical, you could get like a bachelor's degree in this
Yeah,
and actually make money doing this.
there's a whole like program
Yeah,
for reincarnation.
yeah, and it's straight up
Crazy.
out of the school. It's crazy, and it's
I
been
would want to do
proven.
like a credit, no credit, just to like sit in and learn the information, but not like have to take the class and do the paperwork, but just to,
Yeah,
or the homework, you know?
just to learn about it. I'm sure you can do it
Yeah.
online, but yeah, it's true.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's the story of the Pollack twins. I feel like there's so much more to go into with reincarnation. And in order for us to do that, you need to finish the book. So let's
I
get on it.
would. Okay, so I'm gonna finish the book, and you're gonna do your past life regression. Deal, deal,
Oh, that'd be cool.
deal.
Yeah,
Right, and we can talk to it.
let's do it. And there's so many other cool reincarnation stories, but I really like this one because I think this one is just really interesting.
I
Beyond the
actually want to.
Shadows did one recently about a little boy who was remembering his life as a pilot. So maybe
Mm,
we'll do an episode about that one. Or
shout
let
out
me see.
Well, shout out to the Beyond the Shadows guys. They're awesome. But I actually wanted to say another thing too, Nick.
Hmm,
Um,
let me
the
look it
whole
up.
thing about the fear part with the girls being so afraid of the vehicle. I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking about you being so afraid of water. And I was like,
Water.
well, she's in Spain right now, so the water's fine and tame. But I was thinking about that, and I actually have a really hard time with like suffocation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Suffocation's a thing
I
for
get
me.
like freaked out whenever there's like hands around my neck, even if it's just like tickling, you know?
I don't. I actually don't like turtlenecks for that reason.
Mm,
Like I don't like any. Yeah. So
yeah. So Beyond the Shadows, episode 22. They did actually a couple reincarnation stories on that one, so check them out. And we're going to link the Journey of Souls book in the show notes because it is so good. Gabby would know that if she finished it, but it's really
she's
good.
a third of the way there. Click on Amazon, Nicole's Amazon link, please and thank you. Rate, review, share. It helps us.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all we got. I'll be back in America
Next week.
soon, next week, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll talk some more shit about, I don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, we haven't figured
Oh,
that
we
out
have,
yet.
yeah, I think we have cool things coming up, but we'll see. Anyway, it's 9:15 over here and I need to go eat dinner. So we will see you guys soon. Bye.
Bye.
Stop. There we go.